Next up, a discussion on delivering defense innovation. Please join me in welcoming Doug Beck, Director of the Defense Innovation Unit, for a moderated conversation with Courtney Albon, reporter for C4ISR Net.
Great. Well, Doug, it's good to see you. Appreciate being here with you today. Doing well. How are you?
I am great.
Good. Well, looking forward to talking a little bit about the Defense Innovation Unit. You know, you're hitting a pretty big milestone here coming up this August with 10 years since DIU was established. You know, the organization started as kind of a tech experimental outpost in DoD, and now you've grown into an influential innovation organization within the department with $1 billion budget here more recently. So I thought we could start out talking a little bit about kind of how the organization has evolved over the last 10 years, and if you could kind of maybe dig in a little bit to what those evolutions have looked like.
Yeah, so first I just want to say thank you both to you, Courtney, for being here, and to SCSP for putting this together. For me, it's it's always a huge honor to be part of anything that's honoring Secretary Carter in any way. And Stephanie, I think, is here somewhere, but I was going to show. So this is my screensaver every day, not just today. So that's Secretary Carter when he came and he relaunched DIU when he came out and visited. So I just, I think it is really important to kind of just sit back and think about that time and really how prescient he was in seeing back in 2014, then 2015, when a bunch of us were part of helping to get DIU then XR, and I see Chris sitting out here, that there was really no way that we could meet the incredible challenges, the strategic challenges facing the United States even then, and he was looking ahead to the People's Republic of China even then, much less the ones that we'd be facing a decade later. Unless we were able to harness the truly incredible power of our commercially derived tech sector. And ironic though it might seem, given that Silicon Valley was actually built out of the integration and partnership between the private sector, the public sector, and academia in support of national security, that we had completely lost that, and that we had to find a way to recapture that and put it to work for the nation in order to meet those challenges. And that was because in critical areas, actually in 11 of the 14 areas we track as a department that are critical to military capability, areas like AI, cyberspace, energy, biotech, new areas like quantum, we just heard about advanced manufacturing, that those areas are and probably always are going to move faster to meet the relentless demands of billions of consumers around the world and the enterprises that serve them than they ever could in our purely defense-specific, bespoke pathways. And so we need both. And so that's really what DIU was launched to get after, DIU-X then. And the first iteration, I like to call DIU 1.0, was really just about building a bridge at all, and that was probably the first couple of years. And back then, and I know many of the people here will probably remember this, the metric was how many meetings did we have and would anybody show up? And the answer very frequently was no. We then moved pretty quickly past that to DIU 2.0, which was about proving that you could solve real military problems with commercially derived technology, that you could use authorities we already had on the books but didn't know how to use, and create prototypes into the hands of the warfighter within weeks or months rather than 5 or 10 or 15 years, which was the norm everywhere else. And that was revolutionary at the time, but now we've done it a ton of times. DIU's done it 500 times. Other organizations have sprung up around the department to do much the same thing. And that's great, but it's not good enough, because we actually have to do is take that capability and apply it for strategic effect, which is about first focusing it on those most critical needs that we must solve for in order to deter major conflict or win if we are forced to fight, and then doing the hard work of scaling those capabilities so that they can actually deliver strategic impact, which means working with the rest of the department to do that. Now that's a totally different game, which is why Secretary Austin elevated DIU to be a direct report simultaneous with me coming in a couple of years ago. It's why Congress then stepped in to establish DIU in statute as a principal staff assistant to the secretary, and then came in again with that budget that you talked about that was much enhanced to try to get after this. And we really do it in two ways. First, as the national mission force effectively for innovation, working with our partners in the combatant commands and the services and around the rest of the department to deliver those most strategic capabilities that we must get after right now, where we are uniquely positioned as the Secretary's arm for innovation to help get after them. And then helping in kind of that's sort of the vertical stripe of a T. The crossbar of the T is about helping the whole department move forward and helping the tech sector also move forward to be able to work with us so we move all of defense innovation forward. That's really what we've been working at. We've come a long way in the last 10 years. We've still got a very long way to go to get to where we need to be.
So within that context, you've been with DIU for about 2 years now. I would say 2 pretty consequential years for the organization. What are some things that you've learned about defense innovation in that time? What are some of the kind of good and bad lessons that you've learned? And maybe let's start with the good. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of what you've gleaned from the
I've
job
learned
so
that
far?
you can sleep in seat 27E. So I'd say, first of all, we've been pretty focused on really 5 big areas of effort to support that objective that I talked about. The first thing I'd say is that the one thing that's been very positive, the energy and intensity and focus from across the department has really been great in getting after this, and particularly the closer you are to the pointy end of the stick, the more true that is, which is only natural because those are the people who need the capability and see it every single day, including especially our young folks. And I heard General Mahoney, who's a good friend, AFMAC, was up here before talking about how inspiring it is to work with the troops and on a day-to-day basis. And I would say for me, that's always been true, and it's something that I've always seen through my my part-time military hat, but it's been just even more rewarding to be part of that. But across the kind of the big lines of effort, first has been about embedding. So we had the idea of embedding with the combatant commands to both help shape where technology could be used and the thinking there, and then partner in order to help deliver it. And that was an idea, and now we're embedded. So Admiral Paparo this morning was talking about that partnership, how his commercial tech lead is an embed from DIU. We're embedded similarly out in UCOM. The Security Assistance Group Ukraine's science and technology leadership is a DIU embed. We're partnered similarly with NORTHCOM, the other combatant commands, and that's critical for really understanding that warfighter need and helping to leapfrog ahead to how you can solve for it. As critical in understanding that need is the partnership with the services, which then also translates into the second major line of effort, which is all about scaling. And that's really been about partnering, being able to partner effectively for scale. And I'm going to come back to that in a second, because one of the pieces of that is about the budget, which is something that's a major change that people don't always kind of click into when we talk about this. But that partnership, we went from, early in my days at DIU, not having the level of relationship that we should have, to now, every one of our, I sit down with a version of our 2x2 matrix of what's most important, where we're best focused to do it with each one of the service leaders in the Secretariat and the uniform side, and say, okay, this is what we're doing. Are these the right things, and how are we going to scale from those so that they're able to plan ahead? Right? That's all about us working together to make sure we're working on the right stuff together, and that it's set up so that it has a pathway to scale, which is where the impact really is. So that second one's about scale. The third one is, I mentioned all those innovation organizations and bringing that team together. So it's a cohesive team, which we've been really focused on doing, and a bunch of our partners are here today. Fourth is about taking the partnership with the tech sector to the next level, and helping to break down barriers, build on-ramps, and also just keep deepening the relationship with that incredible dual fluency talent that makes up places like DIU. And then last, about international partnerships, where we went from, again, that being that kind of an idea we should do that, to we now have deep embedded partnerships with the Brits and the Australians. We're partnered with the Indians. Have done joint challenges with all of them, as well as with the Japanese. We helped stand up an organization like DIU. We've now done two challenges with them, with the Singaporean. Secretary Hegseth was just there last week. We just launched a new partnership with the UAE. So that's a really important part of what we do too, because we've got common problems to defend the free and open international system. That's great opportunities for our companies and theirs, and it also is a great deterrent because our adversaries hate it when we team up.
Okay.
So those are all areas where I feel like we're making good progress. One other big thing I touch on, if we have a second, is the budget.
Yeah.
So you talked about that enhanced budget. Everybody talks about that $1 billion budget at DIU, or almost, which I always joke is like the most talked about 0.1% of the defense budget. What people don't talk about as much, though, is the flexibility of that budget, the nature of the budget. The majority of that budget, just under $600 million of it, is in a line of funding, effectively called the DIU fielding line, that allows us to go all the way from idea to initial fielding to an operational unit with the same colorless, effectively, money. And that totally unlocks things and allows us to partner in a completely different way with the services. So, for example, with the Army, Jim Rainey, who's the general who leads Army Futures Command, sees, based on what's happening in Ukraine and Gaza, a need for company-level unmanned systems. He puts a directed requirement out for that. We can work together on a prototype for that, like we always would have, maybe put a couple $1 million into the first prototype. We would have always done that. But then we can put a few tens of millions into buying the first set of those things that then he can deploy with their transmission and contact brigades while he's moving their money in the second year and without getting ahead of the budget, planning for the third year for scaling. If we get that right together, there's no valley.
Yeah, which I know is a challenge, which maybe transitions a little bit to what I wanted to ask about next. Was just, what are some of the challenges that you've seen, over the last 2 years, and maybe in that you could, if there's some things you're doing to get after some of them, that would help as well. Yeah.
Okay, I'd say three big challenges. The first one, speaking of the budget, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about, is just, it'd be nice to have a budget with consistency, right? And the impact, the negative impact of continuing resolutions and all the things with them, even with all the hard work, people in Congress and elsewhere to try to make that as painless as possible, it's bad. And so that's bad, and I didn't really understand it at all at the level that I now do. Second big thing is about the hiring of people. I knew, coming from the private sector, that was going to be a challenge. I had no idea just how hard it is. The challenge of bringing talent into the department and moving that talent around effectively and doing it on pace is truly astounding. And to your question, we have made some progress on this. Congress has stepped in to give us some authorities at DIU, similar to some of the authorities that DARPA, for example, has. And we've had great support from the department trying to get after this. But even with that, it's really, really, really hard. And I've got a list as long as my arm of incredibly talented people who are willing to take a 90% pay cut to come into the department and do this critical work for the nation because they believe. But they're not willing to wait around for like 14 or 15 months to see if, after they told their boss they were maybe going to go take the job, whether there's actually a job there, if it's going to happen or not happen, or when it's going to happen. And that's not even talking about the security aspects. So this is something that I think we've really got to fix.
Okay.
And then last is culture. So we've made huge progress as a department in getting after change. And whereas, my predecessors at DIU, I think, really had to battle against really massive antibodies. And I'm not saying there's no antibodies out there, but we're in a very different place. That said, the culture of risk aversion is deep, and it takes time to change culture. It's hard. It's hard. Yeah. And that's something we're working on very hard.
Okay, all right. I wanted to ask, because you mentioned the large number of innovation organizations within DoD. We all know there's a lot of different works out there and a lot of different innovation hubs. And sometimes when there's a lot of different groups of people trying to get after something, it can be hard to coordinate and make sure you're moving in the same direction. Can you talk a little bit about DIU's role in that and what you're doing and what progress you're seeing on that front?
Yeah, and first of all, I'd say, our DICE partners, it's a great team. And they're actually about 271 organizations out there that self-identify as some form of innovation org in the department. Now, there's probably 25 or 30 or 35 that are significant players in that space, but that's still a lot. And there's some incredible talent in that group. And so a big part of what we've done through this DICE organization, the Defense Innovation Community of Entities, is just bring that team together in order to really identify synergies and also break down dyssynergies so we're not tripping all over each other. That's everything from the simplest thing like, hey, let's have CRM so we don't all call on the same company and not know it. So maybe we can share contracts in some places to, oh, you're already doing that. Well, we'll put some money into that contract and expand it, make it a little bit more joint. To doing events together. So instead of showing up in like 20 different places and tripping over each other, showing up together. So for example, out there at booth 522, there's a shared team from across the DICE out there here. And we used to have, it was an issue where I would get complaints from companies who'd say, I went to South by Southwest and I had to decide which of the 5 events that were all at the same time to go to. So there's that. And then maybe even more important, or definitely more important, I think, than that, is we use that team to identify the common barriers that all those companies out there are facing that we all work with so that we can get those together. We at DIU can help to elevate those where policies need to get changed. And then we as a team can get after them. Some of them are the kinds of things we as a DICE team can just go tackle, and others we need help either from the Department or Congress. So things like authorities to operate, where we've made some pretty good progress over the last year working with our partners in CIO and elsewhere. The facility clearances, commercial SCIF space, which is something we're now getting after with help from Congress, cyber hardening, so that that's not just one more barrier for small companies to be able to work with the department, physical on-ramps and digital on-ramps to make it easier to kind of find your way. These are all things that we use that DICE group to get after.
Okay, all right. So we're about 6 months into the new administration. We hear a lot from Pentagon leadership about moving faster, about expanding the industrial base. In your perspective, how is defense tech faring, in this transition? And is change happening, and in what ways?
Yeah, so I would say when I came into this job, I remember one of my first kind of things up on a stage like this, talking about how we were approaching a tipping point. In fact, I think I might have said it at the first kind of Carter event, that we were approaching a tipping point because we had, a leadership across the services who got it, and in the department who got it, and in Congress who got it, and in the interagency who got it, and increasingly across the tech sector who got it. And we're in a totally different place now on each of those. You could hear from every one of the uniform leaders who's been up here, and the civilian leadership who's been up here from the department. People get it. And Congress is massively supportive of defense innovation, not just of DIU, but of defense innovation as a whole and getting after this problem. And the tech sector is, both founders and funders, is really blossoming in getting after this, and it is showing an enormous amount of both capability and also patience where necessary, because we are not the easiest dealer yet. And in this administration, what we're seeing is just acceleration of all of that, whether it's the executive orders around things like defense procurement reform, or Secretary Hegseth's direction on software acquisition, CSO, taking DIU CSO, and having acquisition and sustainment be responsible then for expanding that out across the entire software acquisition pathway. The refocusing of efforts across the department into newer systems we can leapfrog ahead. And one of the things I think it's probably hard to see unless you're in the building feeling it is that sense of urgency and momentum against all of that work. So that is very, very real. We're obviously early days, but we're off to the races on that, and I'm very optimistic about where it will lead in terms of real impact over time.
If I can follow up on that, understanding it's early days, but also that some of these, wheels have been turning for a while. A lot of what you talked about was kind of, inputs. What about like outputs? What about the results from some of that? When do you think we'll see them, or what areas should we be looking to for some of that?
I think we're already seeing them. So the pace at which things are coming out is kind of meaningful and real. Some of that's because of work that was already ongoing but is now being accelerated and focused. And so, whether it's in unmanned systems where we're seeing kind of acceleration of our work around collaborative autonomy and automatic target recognition, resilient C2 in order to create heterogeneous drone swarms, and the focus that we have in the department against that. That's real impact that's starting to happen, or in the counter unmanned space where we're seeing similar concrete action in coming out in place, and some of the things that you're hearing announced. So I don't know, another example. One of my favorites is the Marine Corps. It just launched their attack drone team, and these are the first to deploy a first-person vision FPV drones at scale in the department. Leveraging one of our Blue UAS companies, actually from DIU, as part of that, doing it without Chinese parts or money. And that drone attack team is a mix of junior officers, sergeants, corporals, who are out not just leveraging the technology, but developing the techniques, tactics, procedures for squads, platoons to be able to actually deploy. And we at DIU are helping to back that with some funding, using that same flexible funding.
Yeah.
But that's a concrete example of action that's happening now. And I think all those kinds of things are a reflection of the imperative, the momentum that we already had, and the really massive, not just support, but demand from the administration that we move quickly and put points on the board in this space.
Okay, all right. You've talked, and you talk often about DIU's role in helping the department scale, and my sense is that testing is an important part of scaling. And as you look to field these technologies, in what ways is DIU partnering with other organizations to help to bring some of these systems and critically the operators who will be using them together to prove out some of the capabilities and concepts? What role do you play in that, and how is that growing?
Yeah, it's massive.
Yeah.
Be the answer. So it's a huge part of what we're doing. Actually, one of the biggest learnings, I think, for us as an organization, for us as a department, and certainly for me personally, has been the criticality. Now that we're finally the dog starting to catch the bumper on being able to actually acquire some of these things and acquire them at speed, to ensure that we are doing the hard work of managing all of the .mil PFP, right, the man, train, and equip, and all the other pieces that are necessary for that to not just be stuff, but to be capability that actually makes a difference, that can deter aggression or can win if we have to fight. And that starts with testing. And so it's critical to be doing these things in parallel, not in serial, the way that we historically might have. So you do it in serial, you kind of get the stuff, and you decide what you're going to test, and you maybe go do a test, and you get some stuff, and you come back, and it takes 5 or 10 years. If you do those things together constantly, you have operators, technologists, developers all together working, you can move dramatically more quickly, and you have to do that. And so we're working, that's what we're doing, for example, all that work that I mentioned in Indo-PACOM, sort of Admiral Paparo and the team, with the Navy and the other services, and over 100 individual companies now actively testing and really rehearsing for capabilities that we need to be able to put forward. But it's also about, I mentioned some of the things we're in counter unmanned systems. So for example, in counter UAS, we're working closely with Northcom. We have to be able to sense, decide, and act. So in sensing, we're working on low-cost sensing. We have a new challenge we're doing. In Decide, we're working very closely with the Army on AI-enabled decision support. And in an ACT, it's new effectors, including low collateral for use in population centers. The reason I mention these is we're testing all of those in Falcon Peak with Northcom this coming fall, because it's got to be develop the stuff, test it now, learn from that, keep going, right? That's critical. I also want to mention one other thing. In fact, I'm announcing it today. Ta-da! There may be something, in fact, should be dropping right now, which is what we're calling Project GI, which is a $20 million prize challenge using that same flexible funding pending congressional notification. Focused on solving 3 specific operational problems to start with, but this is all about working with the first, the Army's transformation contact bridge, the Ranger Regiment specific, as well as the other services, on essentially putting the kit in place, plus some of the other things necessary in order to allow for rapid operational testing with actual operators at the tactical level to test and play and learn, so that we can then take those learnings, improve the capability, and also take those learnings, send them to other units, and scale the thing. That's a critical piece that by working together with the services, we can bring that forward a year or two or even more.
Okay. Could you see doing something like that in other areas? Do you think this is a model for how you might be doing
Oh yeah,
testing
no,
in the
absolutely,
future? Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, I think this is a model it's already a model that we're trying in other areas, and we're just kind of formalizing it a little bit more.
Okay.
Taking something that we've been doing in individual areas like the company level UAS and actually making it more programmatic.
Okay.
And I shudder to use the word program, so I don't mean it with a capital P, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I gotcha. Well, we've got a few minutes left. Wanted to kind of wrap up. We talked at the beginning about, the first 10 years. We've been talking a lot in this conversation about what you're doing now. What do you see as being kind of the next evolution, I guess, for DIU, and what do you need to get there? What needs to happen to, get you to that spot?
If I kind of zoom out, I kind of want to answer that question maybe a little broader than DIU, because I think it's sort of what I think we've all got to do. And I think the biggest thing that we need to change is kind of this bizarre dance that we have between the department and our internal activity, and our own processes, the Congress and quote unquote industry, and like change the nature of that dance and change it for good and at scale, not like in little pieces. And to give an idea of just how bonkers the way we do this now is, and I think most people in this room probably already get this, but I'm just going to describe it because to me it's crazy. If you think about it from the world I used to live in, right? It's like if today iPhone 16s are available in the store. It's like if we were playing with an iPhone 13 that we've been playing with for 3 years because we had to play with something for 3 years before we could think about buying it. So we had this iPhone 13, play with it for 3 years, iPhone 16 is out, and then we say, okay, I'm going to buy this iPhone 13. I'd like to order some. In fact, I'm buy them for my family. So I order my iPhone 13, but I order it for 2 years from now, which means that when the iPhone 18 starts coming out, I'm going to finally get my iPhone 13. And I only get the first one because the other ones for the rest of my family are going to come out when the iPhone 19 and 20 are out, which means that by definition, that hardware is 5, 6, 7 years out of date, and that's on technology that, for example, unmanned systems moves much more quickly than an iPhone, and that's just the hardware. The software is way faster than that. That's crazy. So we've got to get after this, and I'd say 4 big things I'd love to see us do. The first one is I think we've got to double down on the places where this is working. So where we're actually breaking through and making change happen, reinforce the salient in places like DIU, but not only DIU, of where we're seeing that change happen. And that includes this flexible funding piece that allows us to cross the bridge in the way that I was talking about. Yeah. Second, I would expand that experiment to others. Now, this is critical. So what I would do is I would actually expand it to the services, which are the engines of scale. For some portion of their budget that's focused on technology, I'd say you've got this flexibility, but it comes with the same transparency that DIU has. And I share a spreadsheet that has every single dollar of exactly how that money is getting spent and how it's going, whether it's good or bad or ugly, with Congress every 2 weeks, right? So maybe they got to do something like that in whatever way makes sense for a whole service, but transparency breeds trust, breeds flexibility, and I think we've got to move from programs of record to portfolios of record where the Army or the Navy or the Air Force can move within a category like unmanned systems and buy the latest or the best, even if it changes. That also will force competition for longer. Those companies now know they're competing all the way up to the end, right? And that will be good for all of us. Third big thing that I would change is talent. I mentioned how hard it is to bring people in and out. We have to fix that because we can't solve this problem unless we can bring the right talent into the department and out and back in again, civilian, military, et cetera. And then last is about culture, and really that's about incentives and the way that we think about risk. And I think we've got to change the way that we think about this so we get out of a world where we spend all of our time or much of our time on a day-to-day basis protecting against small R risks, risk to process, risk to finance, reputational risk, even legal risk, which of course we need to manage for, but we're so careful about those risks sometimes that we miss the big picture of the big R risk that we are actually taking on, which is risk to mission, risk to force, strategic risk for the nation, the kinds of risks that Ash Carter was talking about when he started DIU in the first place.
Great. Well, we'll be tracking all of those areas with you. But Doug, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Courtney.
All right. See you.